Yes, and I'm not surprised at all. Always so reliable, Dr. Winford James. Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us on Hard Talk and on the topic of the economy. But I have to do the right thing first, and the right thing first is to introduce you formally to the listeners. And so that formal part, I have to tell you from a linguist to a financial expert in a sense, but a financial expert, especially because of today's topic, which is on the economy, because you deal with cooperatives, and we all know the history of the cooperatives. It's certainly not the same as it were when they began, but they certainly were intended and are still intended for those who want to build financial wealth and financial security, but who do not have the wherewithal of others to be able to do so. And this is where this cooperative society, of which you become a member, you're not just a person and putting in your money into a bank, but you are a owner of the bank. It's part of you, you are part of it, and it is part of you. So you are well versed on that. So let me give you the more our listeners. You are called a political analyst and a political commentator because you have written columns for media or print media, both the Express and the Newsday, and you are very well known anyhow. True trim begonian, but I'm going to tell you for today, true begonian. Although you told me you're in Tobago today,
Uh,
you tell me you're in Tobago, right?
I,
And
I
you're
am
not eating anything in front of me today,
not
right?
today. Not
But
today.
in terms of qualifications, or more than qualified, he has his PhD, Dr. James, because as the title indicates, he has a PhD in linguistics, and he also has a diploma in education with distinction from both from as well as BA in linguistics, Spanish, French, and linguistics from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. So he's a true West Indian man, just like me. All my education is from from UE, and I can speak only for myself, but I certainly had the choice not to have it in the Caribbean. I certainly did. And I think if my parents had their druthers, as they did with many of my other siblings, they would have preferred that I go abroad and get my education. But I was absolutely determined that my education would come from where I came from. So that is your educational background. You're a retired UWI lecturer, and you were the former chair of the School of Graduate Studies of Research, Graduate Studies and Research at UWI, and you have held posts in the Cooperative Society as a chairman. More recently, you were a member or chair of the Trinidad and Tobago Deposit Insurance Fund Cooperative Society Limited. What a mouthful, but anyway, that's what it is. And but currently, at least since 2022, so I assume it is still current. You're the chairman of the THA Capital Equity Fund
Venture
Limited,
capital.
Venture Capital. Thank you, Venture Capital. Equity Fund Limited, is that correct?
Yeah,
And you're on
that,
the
that,
board of
that,
directors.
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so you come with a background, not just in linguistics, because we're not here to speak Spanish and French, because then I'll be in a lot of trouble. All I'll be able to say is hola. You know, you know why David is laughing? Because whenever he
Well,
sends me anytime he sends me a message, the first word is hola. I want to know.
okay.
And that's a little joke. Every time I never asked him why hola, but we aren't talking hola today because then I'll have to say adios. All right. So all joke.
One of these days, Karen, many of us
Yes.
will be able to speak Spanish.
I
It will
never like
take a
Spanish.
little while,. But it will happen.
But I don't like it. When I was
Uh-huh.
in school, I never liked it. I find it's like, I'm just telling you personally, I love French because,
Mm.
and I did both Spanish and French, then I did French at A levels, and I went to France and spent a few months there in the south of France,
Right.
supposedly to learn this, hear what the word?
Yeah.
Supposedly, or
Supposedly.
ostensibly. Well, you know what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
to learn French because I think of all I think the Spanish to me is a little too guttural for me, a little too harsh. That's just me. I
Okay.
know it's an easier language to learn, but I never took to it. That's not to say I'm not taking to Venezuelan or people from Spain. I'm just telling you
Yeah.
that, but it's not my favorite. I love French. I love the sound of the French, softness of the French language, the sophistication of the French language, And in
I
fact,
suppose you can speak it a little bit, right?
un petit, un
Ah,
petit.
petit.
Plus quand anyway, we aren't talking any French. But when I did go there, of course, like everything, practice is what makes the difference. I read a little book, Le Petit Nicolas, when I
Mm,
was there and all that sort of thing. But I do love that because also, as a linguist, much better than I, that when you look at many of our words, savoir faire, je ne sais quoi, all those expressions that we have, but those may be more sophisticated ones, but there are a lot more that come from the French language because the French, until, they really, to speak French in England, if you were living in England, it set you aside from the peasants. The peasants spoke English. The
right.
French, the upper class spoke
Mm,
French. And
right.
so up to today, many of the words that they have in English words do have a French origin, and I do also know a lot of our words have a Hindu origin too,
Mhm.
which just has nothing to do with our discussion today,
Yeah, part of the
right?
process, is what I
Yeah,
see.
but yeah, so, but that was really interesting when I did find that out. How many words, bangers, bungalow, so many words that you wouldn't think that have a Hindu background. But in any event, we're talking economy. And
Uh,
while we want to talk about economy, I want you, now I've said so much already, I really want you, let me just say by way of introduction to how I could like, if you would like us to look at the topic. And of course, Dr. David McIntyre, Mr. Ulak, and always jump in is that I think you look at the economy for us, for the man in the street to understand or to be able to not to understand, but to be able to relate. It's like going to a doctor for a health checkup. When you go to the doctor for a health checkup, he's going to check your blood pressure, he's going to check your heart rate, he's going to do all different tests. But the purpose of all of those tests is to determine your health, and if you are not that healthy, what he will prescribe prescriptions for to make things better. So
right.
he uses certain things that he will always use, look at your heart rate, whatever it is. And that's the truth about the economy. So there are things that they're always going to have to look at to determine whether our economy is healthy or not, and whether there are prescriptions that are needed to be implemented, and what are the things that may be preventing those prescriptions from being implemented. You have to talk about a non-compliant patient. We don't want to be called non-compliant. So I want to hear from you before I give my take on it. What do you think are the major issues facing Trinidad economy, and what is your outlook in a very broad sense for the economy of Trinidad and Tobago today in 2023 going forward?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. It's very good to be here, and I am relaxed in my porch in Tobago here, and feeling the breeze come
Okay,
across,
stop it. You just want to make me jealous.
and then later I will go to the beach.
Oh God, stop it.
Which is only about 5-10 minutes
Oh
away.
my gosh. Not by
So
the oil spill though.
no, on the side of the oil field, it's not good at all. Not for me. No, I am more on the southern side, southwestern side, right? So I don't think I haven't gone there yet, but I will see this afternoon what the state of affairs is. But when I was traveling along the Lambo Main Road, I saw the rocks blackened by the oil, and it's an ugly sight. And when the waves wash the shore, you can see the color of oil mixed with water. It's not the kind of thing I would like to see happen to anybody's island, especially my island. But we don't want to go there this afternoon. Not at all. We are talking about the economics of Trinidad and Tobago. Hopefully, in a way that the listener to this program will understand easily, right? And if we are going to do so, we have to use simple language. I plan to do that as best as I can. And I start off by saying that this country, from let's say 1960s, when we got independence, up to date right now, this country has grown only by about 2% every year. 2%. When other countries have been growing more than 25%, more than 30%. So we now have, what do they call that thing? A GPA?
GDP?
GDP? Not the GDP itself, but the what per person, that one. The prosperity of the country per person.
Gini coefficient? I don't
Uh,
know.
I forget,
GDP
but
per
it will come
person?
back to me. Yeah, you know, we try to measure it in terms of the GDP of the country, and you have the average per person per year. Well, in the Cayman Islands, it's some 90%, you know, when we are at 16,000. And as I said, we have not been growing very well. We have been moving at 2%. The standard of living has been moving at 2% per year. And that tells us how poor we are. And I say this in a context where we have had many booms, many oil and gas booms, and yet we are so impoverished. And we note the impoverishment in the various communities of the country. There are many communities in Trinidad and in Tobago that are impoverished, and there's inequality from community to community. And why is that? Why is it we cannot equalize the state of affairs? Why is it we can't work in particular ways in each community to lift the standard of living? Why do we take it for granted that some communities should be richer than others? And you will note that a lot of the crime that is uh, attacking Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of the crime um, is to be found, and it is generated from the most disadvantaged communities, the communities where the standard of living is really not up to par, where people don't have the opportunity, don't have the circumstances to develop themselves as others have been developing themselves. People in these communities are desperate. They leave where they are, some of them, those who are ambitious, and those who don't want their children to go through what they have gone through. These people are leaving the disadvantaged communities by the droves and moving into the city and other urban areas. Yeah, they are not except by, of course, um, a member of the party and the cabinet more than the business, of course, of the constituencies themselves. These people are leaving these disadvantaged, disheveled kinds of communities. And we need to reorganize the politics of the country, the politics of the country, to make people develop themselves according to their own likes in true democratic form. Now, I know you don't hear the economists talking like that, right? But we really need to come to a conversation where, wherever, we must identify, of course, what those and where those communities are. In Tobago, for example, Vanos James and I have calculated that there are about 42 communities in Tobago. We're not talking now about the political districts. We are talking about the cultural districts, the ethnic districts, if you wish. And what we are seeing here are people who, especially after Flora, have not been able to pull themselves out of the, shall we say, poverty, um, comparative poverty that they've been experiencing. And we need to go to those people, talk to them, find out what their problems are, talk to them about how they can improve their own communities by getting involved in a number of productive and health giving kinds of activities. But we talk about 42 communities in Tobago. You could imagine how many there are in Trinidad, abandoned from by the mainstream, the economic mainstream of Trinidad and Tobago. And we need people to speak up, right, on behalf of these people and treat them like everybody, like people.
But Dr.
Yes?
James, not that I want to
Mm.
stop you in making your contribution, and a lot of the problems you're referring to apply to us in Trinidad.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
think if I asked David McIntyre to speak of his own issues with trying to get his own community in a break, to get a really vibrant tourism sector going with that, the largest pitch lake in the world,
Yeah.
and the setting up of a proper museum and all of that, and the number of joint select committee meetings they have had, the number of meetings they have had. I don't want to speak for him. So, with all due respect, I think talk is very cheap. People want to see what is the purpose of our government. The government, when you had the Great Depression, and you had to take the people of United States out of the Great Depression, it was, they used, there are two models, but of course the model that they use, and we still have to use to some extent, is that the government, its job is not to feed you, but to teach you to fish, but you're not teaching me to fish.
Right.
So the FDR had that great, what you call it, that big plan, where they built a lot of highways, a lot of roads, created a lot. Not only did he create opportunity in terms of employment, but by connecting the country with highways and creating opportunities. You have to create the environment for the opportunities. You have to give me some. Now, if you say you give me those opportunities meaningfully, and I do not take advantage of them, then you really have a problem. And I think a lot of what you're probably encountering, and I certainly think it's true in Trinidad, is there's a lot of cynicism and a lot of disenchantment, because the people hear a lot of talk, but where's the talk backed with action? And you said that you wouldn't wanted to speak too much, using all kinds of whatever language that economists use. But I'm going to have to do that, because, but explain it. Explain to them that we're not making generalization, because it's very easy for you and me and anybody to come and say how the economy doing bad, how this. It's very easy. But what facts are stubborn things, and what we have to rely on are facts. And the facts are this. I'm getting this from The Economist. I'm getting this from the Central Bank Economic Bulletin that they issued in January of this year. I'm
Mm.
getting this from the CSO. And if you went to a doctor, I don't know what your heart rate is supposed to be, but he will know what normal heart rate is. And if your own is too high or too low, he knows he's sick, right? But the same way he knows that, because he knows what his standard is, then we have to say, well, what are the things you should expect that would show that the economy really is in the condition it is? And secondly, what is the responsibility of the government in order to facilitate and assist persons in growing that economy? And you can use very simple examples, Dr. James. One example would be our foreign exchange reserves. I mean, if you read the last economic bulletin, the central bank governor said that the last time they said, well, a few years ago, just a few years back, I'm talking about 2018 or thereabouts, and that still was not really good for Trinidad. 7.8 billion US in foreign exchange reserves. Reserves are not reserves to have money, Reserves is to pay bills, right? Because when you want to buy medicine or you want to buy food, and whatever you want to buy from coming in from abroad, they're not taking your dollar. You have to pay them in US dollars. So that reserves you talk about is the import cover. That's what they call it. They tell you that is equivalent to your import cover. And our import cover has fallen from what it used to be over 12 months to the last report to 7 years and 8 months. That's what import cover is now. And what he said in his report, we have fallen our foreign exchange reserves from August, fell from over 6.8, which was still bad because just 2 years before it was 7.9. His last report is 6.25. So it fell by $574 million. And it's okay if it's falling when you're replacing it, but where's the replacement? And that's a reality. So when you're telling people that the economy is not good, that is a good yardstick that you use how much money you have. And when we talk about how much money we have, we're not talking about our money because who is taking it? Who is buying it from us? No, you have to pay them in their US dollars. The US is still king, and we do not have. We are. And it's a. The reality is, it is being drained, right? So that's one indicator that things are not going in the right way. You talk about the growth, how economy grows. The economists have said they use 2015 as the base year. All just like what you just said, every other economy, well, you can't even compare yourself with Ghana, but even places like Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean jurisdictions, after COVID, they saw significant growth in their economy, by some cases 10% and so on. But Ghana is about 50 something percent, 40 something percent, right? So you are looking at economies that are growing, meaning you're producing more goods and services. So there's more to sell, and therefore, if there's more to sell, the government supposedly has more to tax. And if the government has more to tax, it has more revenue. And if the government has more revenue, it can use the revenue to produce things in the country to grow the economy and go in these 42 communities in your Tobago and the
But
hundreds that must
you
be
see,
in
Karen, qualitatively, we are not there. I mean, you
But
could itemize the lacks of our economic development and government policy, but you still have to answer how is it so many communities are bereft of those things?
because there's no guidance. Listen, when you are in leadership, if an economy is doing well all over the world, it's not here in any part of the world. If you're looking at an economy doing well, you always look at the quality of the leadership. Whether it was Merkel in Germany, whichever country you want to look at, it's not a one-man show, but you need a leader because the leader gives the vision and the mission, and the leader says what needs to be done in order to grow an
But
economy.
you,
Give you
to
an
the extent
example.
that to the extent that Dr. Rowley is our political leader, the prime minister,
I said leadership, huh?
you don't hear him taking a problem that we have and discussing it with the public.
But he doesn't want to.
Well, I don't. Is it simply because he doesn't want to,
Well,
or is it far more far reaching than that?
I think because he doesn't. And you know what? Okay, you tell me what you think it is then. What it may be.
He doesn't have the politics to do so. He doesn't care. He
I
thinks that
reckon
he has enough of a political base to win again. He
you're
has a
absolutely correct.
followership. Sorry,
I think you're absolutely correct.
I didn't hear that. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
said I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, well, it's more than that. It's whether in fact Dr. Rowley and his cabinet are interested in fixing the governance problem in such a way that people in the disadvantaged communities that I refer to are decent part of that exercise. We don't have, for example, in this country, oversight of the executive. The executive is cabinet. Cabinet because the ruling party has a majority. Cabinet rules the parliament. Okay? And if you have a situation where in that parliament you don't have oversight of what they do because you haven't fixed the constitution and the social aspects of all of it. You have not fixed the governance structures under which we live, then you are not going to find the kind of wealth and the kind of happiness, economic happiness, the kind of growth in the abandoned, in the neglected communities. I mean, I don't have to name out to you guys where those communities are and how they are this way. It's been so perennially, and there's a kind of stasis. There's a kind of stasis that is all over Trinidad and Tobago that prevents us from acting innovatively and decisively. So you cannot divorce economic wealth from the kinds of laws under which we choose to govern ourselves. So Dr. Rowley has come up with a seven-man committee. I think you referred to it, Karen. Did
I
you
don't know
know?
which one. He's always coming up with committees. The
Well,
last one was the Constitution for. Is that the last one or the
but
party? I don't know.
Trinidadians,
I get so
Trinidadians,
lost with the number of committees he passed.
yeah,
And
but Trinidadians must resist. They must get up and
yeah, but they're
talk
not. But
about
they're
these
not.
issues.
They're
Why
not.
is it? Why do you need a seven-man constitution committee at this point?
Because you want to get because Dr. Mr. Basil Pandis died, and his daughter said that that's what his last wish was, and they want to they're probably courting her as we speak because
Well,
what
in
they
that case, the
all they're
committee is not
doing is
well structured.
winning an
It's not well
election.
composed.
No, but it's about winning an election. And what I'm saying, Dr. James, having had the opportunity and honor to serve in government, I don't know that I need to use a whip to get you to do the right thing. It is true that the Constitution is facilitative of a lot of what you have said, and he did not create the Constitution. I mean, that Constitution, it comes from when we became independent. And then we have the Republican version of it, which I don't know how much difference it is because that president is really the mouthpiece of the cabinet. But what I will say is that I don't think that in a democracy and in a government that is really committed to serving the needs of the people, it doesn't take too much, especially in a country like ours, where we have been blessed with so much, both Trinidad and Tobago, potential that we have wasted it away. And to me, it has come down to this. I think they have come to a point, they may be proven
Mm.
wrong, but they certainly, the sense you get, you speak to anyone, that anyone I have spoken to, there's a sense of people saying, well, if, I don't know if you know this, but the voting turnout in the so-called strongholds of the government is very low because
Right.
the people there they are cynical, disenchanted, and they're used. They are used and abused, and yet they are used and abused, and then they're given a jersey or whatever they give them, and then but many of them do not vote. But in the non-government constituencies, the turnout of the electorate is very high. But we have the pass the poll system, so it really, at the end of the day, even if you were to get the popular vote in the country, both Trinidad and Tobago, it really would not matter if the constituency which you control, you win the majority of the votes, no matter if the turnout is extremely low. I understand some is like 28%. But what I'm saying, you don't need to be having to do that. Because if you want to go into government, you should go into government for love of your country. And if you are motivated by love of your country, you are given a lot of tools and you're given, I have been inside there. I've been inside there, so I'm not sitting outside it.
But I am hearing a certain wishfulness on your part.
Okay.
You are saying that they should not be going to government for those reasons, on those bases. You are
Should not
using
be going
words
to
like
them for
should.
what?
They should not be getting into government. Um,
Oh,
if I'm saying you are thinking that there's a certain wishfulness that you and others have, you think this thing will change just like that because you're wishful. Can't change like that. It takes people who understand in a scientific way what the problems of the country are and who gather a set of plausible ways of solving that problem. And they get people to get involved, people in their own communities to get involved and to come up with actual uh, remedies, actual remedies to fix these things. But that takes a kind of engagement that you don't hear the economists and the wannabe uh, politicians speak about. Anybody who is interested in fixing Trinidad and Tobago has to fix those kinds of problems. And the governance problems are critical. The fixing of the governance problems is critical to the kind of change, kind of transformation, the kind of results that we are looking for. Now,
but
I am
I,
suggesting to you that I don't see many Trinidadians rising and talking intelligently and rationally about these issues. If you hear them at all, you don't hear them, for example, saying, here are some communities at disadvantage. And in order to fix them, we need a number of professionals in a wide variety of specified skills, areas. You don't hear that sort of thing. What?
Dr. James, I'm going to have to disagree with you to somewhat, a
Mm,
good bit actually,
yeah.
in terms of that, because one, well, I will just speak one from my own experience, but two, I know this that Trinidad and Tobago has a number. We have so many tertiary education level, whether it is the Arthur Lockjack, the Costa, the UTT, the UWI, the YTEP. There are so many tertiary level institutions in this country that are teaching tech for that there is no end. In fact, there was an article in which Dr. Marlene Arts was quoted and talking about a young lady who was graduated in social science in 2019 and has been looking for a job since then and cannot get a job in a field because there are no jobs to be had. Because there's underemployment, there's a mismatch, and that has to come from government planning. When you are planning an economy and you're wanting to see which direction is best, you go and you get experts, consultants.
Yeah.
We've had so many consultants come
Karen,
to us. But what you need is after you get the consultants, you have to be prepared to execute and implement.
consider that the planning is lopsided. Consider that people are concentrated in certain areas. Consider that you don't distribute these professionals across the country more or less evenly. We don't have that sort of thing. We don't have the politics to maintain it. But if we were to change that, and if we were to distribute these professionals across the communities, which we have never done, we don't have the thinking, we don't have the policy, and we don't have the belief. It's going to continue as we are. Just as we
Okay.
rely on oil and gas as the mainstays of the economy, when of course there are so many other things we can do with the wealth that we have, it's the same way.
But Dr. James, again, I'm going to have to take exception to that because who is to say that those very same consultants do not give those very same recommendations to the government?
No, I'm not.
Who is to say that they come and say that what is important is to go out into these several communities and bring about the change?
I'm
Who's to say that
almost
that has not
sure.
been recommended to the government?
You know that they do.
Huh? Well, when I was in government, what my experience, and I could say having been there, we certainly took the advice of the consultants, and we certainly were willing to implement it. And I don't think the problem is that it's a question of the political will. You're not going to get everything. Nobody has to tell you, number one. I have read articles. Many people have written articles in the newspaper. You must have maybe been among them that have spoken about ways in which we could develop Trinidad and Tobago beyond the energy sector. The agro and agro industry, for example, in CARICOM, Guyana taking the lead there, saying that by 2025 we should only import 25% of our food. We could have policies in terms of tariffs for a lot of the food that we see in the supermarkets that are they probably have to throw it out because they have gone beyond the expiry date, and there's such fancy high end food that you serve in the most elite establishments selling in ordinary supermarkets. If you want to allow persons to bring those things into the country, then pay the price for that and let the consumer pay the price and the country benefit. Why do we have so many why do we have so many franchises in this country? Somebody is giving them the authority to come into this country. When I cannot get $100 from the bank, but they are able to have franchises upon franchises upon franchises upon franchises, using up my US dollars, paying people very low salaries that have nowhere to go. Who takes on that responsibility? Who is allowing them in?
But
Who is giving them the license to come in here?
I have been proposing a different way of thinking. What is
Okay.
the define with the thinking? Because you are talking about the energy sector. I'm not talking about but economic sectors.
Well, that's probably what I am. That's why I look at it.
They are located in places that exclude the vast majority of people. I am not talking about, I'm talking about going back into the communities and helping to beef up the strengths that they have by, of course, getting professionals there working with them. You're distributing the professionals who we say are unemployed, can find employment in the way that I'm talking about. But you go to their communities and you sit with them and you help develop their communities according to their liking. That's what I am talking about.
Well,
The
well, you
having
know,
centralized government, Karen, it's been centralized for the longest while. It's everything in Port of Spain. You
that,
follow?
that, that, that is an argument which I'm not going to question at all. But what I'm saying is, taking that approach, you might be taking a bit of a silo approach, and also too, I guess when you are in government, you have to take a broader perspective. For example, using your example of going into the community, um, let's say one of the things that we should really develop far more than we have done in the past is tourism. But we have a special brand of tourism that very much mimics Mauritius in terms of our size of our country, the ethnic composition of our country, and the fact that they lost their preferential treatment with sugar, so they had to look to see how else could we make a living and get revenue. And one of the things they did is they got into cultural tourism. You can go into all of these communities, but what do? You send people into those communities, speak with them, and say, you want to get into, you want to be self sufficient, you want to have your own little business. But look, you want to have your own Airbnb, but you have to come up to a certain standard because there's TripAdvisor, they're all electronic mechanisms by which they rate you. So there are enough people in Trinidad and Tobago that can go into those same communities and say to them, if it is that tourism is the area in which you want to develop, you want to have your little restaurant, you want to have a little coffee shop, you want to have a thing selling Tobago foods only, you want to have a little Airbnb, don't leave it to them to do it. You bring in the professionals who have the marketing and all the skill sets to come
Exactly,
and help them to develop that.
Karen.
And, and that is what a government can do.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And in fact, you say has broad policy or broad focus. They don't have, their focus is narrow. They have no sense. about what I am talking about here. They have no
I've
sense.
written about it, Dr. James. I've written about it, and it has
Yeah.
been published in the papers.
What?
The what you say, what I'm talking about specifically right now, because you're talking about, I think you're talking about there's a large extent empowerment, and the, not top down, but to listen to what they need and respond to. I think that's what I'm hearing you saying.
There are bases, there are foundations in every community, but they need to be lifted. Yeah. They don't need to be displaced, you know. They
No,
need to get from this from the greater knowledge of tier four people who have gone to university and other tertiary. They need that knowledge to help them develop their own circumstances, which have foundation, as we know. But it's not going to be happening because government has some policy on oil and gas. Policy on oil and gas is centralized, and it is a policy that devolves into the government saying, "Look, we are in charge, you know, and we can distribute the proceeds, the wealth from our exploitation of these things as we see fit." The spatial inequity of the distribution of wealth is alarming in this country. And I'm saying we have, I didn't want to go there, but we have political parties, especially the ruling ones, political parties who are so reliant on handouts from the government that when the time comes, when calamity hits the world, they're going to find themselves in no man's land because they have not had their talents productively used, productively treated.
and
That
whose
has
fault is that? And who do you think should take the lead on that?
if you
Who
want
should
to
take
hold
the lead on that?
yourself to an answer, it is the PNM party. They are the ones that
But
are
this is what I'm saying, Dr. Jane. We're not different. We're not apart in our thinking, you know. We're not apart in our thinking that way, you know. What both of us are saying, hopefully, I think, is that the many people, and you're talking about your communities in Tobago, but we can come right here in Trinidad. I
yes.
have a view, and it's an opinion, so I think I'm entitled to have an opinion on this. It suits them to keep them right there, because you see,
How does it suit?
you
How
need
does
to
it suit?
have, you need to have your crew ready to do your bidding, and as long as you keep them in a state of dependence, rather than try to make them entrepreneurs and to become self-sufficient and be able to own their own little piece of business and grow that business, you lose control. And what is important is the control, because it is that control
How
that
does that benefit them? Well, you have a people to rule, you have a people to manage, you have a people to lead. How does that approach benefit them? To keep your people
it's not
ignorant,
we're not, but
to
this is
keep them
exactly it.
compliant. How does that help you? When I say
Well, it
you know,
helps you to
the
get the votes, you
person
see.
who is taking steps to make sure that people stay at the bottom tiers of the social ladder.
Okay, I'll tell
Who
you how it
benefits from
is.
that?
Okay, I'll tell you how it is that. Because, okay, let's use an example. As
Uh-huh.
I'm using a parent and a child. When a child is in his parents' care, and of course is dependent on the parent, there are many rules that the child may not like, but they have to
Okay.
follow it because the
Right.
parent is the one feeding them, clothing them, and sheltering them. The day that that child becomes financially independent, and he gets that by either having his own business
Mm.
or education, you know, some of those rules that the parents wanted to enforce, he said, "No, I'm not following it." And the parent then goes into a tizzy because he has lost control. And control is important for voting, because as long as you need me. So it is not by chance. This is my opinion, anyhow. It is
No,
not by
I'm not denying
chance.
that at all. The
Right. So what
question
I am saying,
is it good?
but it's good for the party. That's what I'm
How?
saying.
How?
Because they
How can
stay in
how this
power.
party can even think that that is good?
Because they
Demonstrate
because
goodness for me. I don't mean you personally, but what
Okay, so
party
somebody
leaders
told
have
me
done?
this. Somebody told me this. They said,
Uh-huh.
and actually not somebody, but it was someone. When I say somebody, I mean someone who probably studied all these human nature and so on. Said three things that human beings would desire and want, and once those things are achieved, that's all they really want: power, sex, and money. Okay,
Okay.
okay. So
Some people have all three more than others, right?
okay. So therefore, if that is a motivating factor for humanity, one of the things in order to maintain power is you have to have power. You have to have the ability to have power over me. Because if I am independent of you, that as they like to tell people, you can't tell me what to do. You know, I pay my own mortgage. You can't tell me what to do. You know, I buy my own food. You cannot instruct me anymore. You know, I am my own man. That is
Yeah,
the
but if you
greatest
if you
thing
have
about
that
politics.
political if you have that political philosophy, you'll be going nowhere.
But that is the
Because
but
because
that has to be the philosophy.
it is not as if you can't govern people who are independent or who consider themselves independent. It's not as if that can't happen. You change the dynamics of the wealth and whatever makes people comfortable, and you get them to make themselves better at what the government thinks it's good at. Right?
Okay.
People's level of comfort, of
Yeah.
satisfaction, are too low. Their ceilings are not high at all. They get
Okay.
by and they are easily pleased.
That's
That's not
true.
what I'm talking about. I'm talking about young people, just bright young people that come out of the university every year, being made to see that they can take up their bed and walk if they are allowed to do the innovation that they want to do.
They are afraid to take that risk.
Right. And so, how do we work on that fear?
Okay,
Somebody,
well, listen, this is the conversation. They
this
are
is the
afraid that was
conversation. Yes. Yes.
especially where we do not have a homogeneous population. Yes,
Right.
Jamaica and I think we
And,
have the social structure, but Trinidad and Tobago gets really complicated when you add to the mix race, ethnicity, religion, because all of that mix up in it, and and not only that, you can't say they and both groups are on equal numbers, and so both of them are more concerned about getting back to have that power and money. Well, I don't even give them sex, but give them power and
but
money. And therefore, in order to ensure that, instead of focusing on uplifting persons so that they can make their own individual choices and having the confidence that they can do it, there's a fear, like the parent, that if I give you your freedom, or if the day you get your financial independence, you might never come to visit me again. Because to tell you the truth, I really never liked you, but I had to come here because you were my enemy.
but it happens in some cases. But I can't generalize on that.
You know what I mean, though? Yeah, I'm just making
Parents have about 18 years, maybe a little more, these days because it's difficult for young people, even in their early 20s, to live by themselves and to get by. But the point is you use a word that I like. We have to instill the ways of confidence in our children. And we have to show them by proof, not by obia, not by, you know, um, people being slaves to the political party in charge. They have gone to the university, they have been able to research knowledge at the individual level, and they can see possibilities. But what has happened is that over time, the PM has made people see very low possibilities, very weak possibilities, and they have bought into that nonsense. But if they were to become a little more innovative in the
yeah,
way they think about their own development, things can happen, things can change. You know, if private society could be on a radio programs nightly or close to that, explaining the dynamics of what is necessary to transform this country from the, I used the word before, the stasis that it has been locked into. If people can be discussing the issues, right, in the way that you and I are actually, we will see the kind of change. But if they are waiting to get into the fire service, if they're willing to get into the police service, if they're willing to get into the lower stations of the public service, they're not going to go very far.
But
And,
Dr. James, in all fairness, in that discussion, because I've had discussions with other people over not this specific topic, but oftentimes we have to look at how we became a nation. And, we cannot divorce 2023 from the 1956 and the becoming of a nation. And to many people who came from the middle or lower middle class or the lower income, and we're talking about those who follow this current government, the ultimate for them was to be able to become a teacher or police officer or to put on a tie and go in an office and thing because of the whole thing of slavery and all that it represented.
right,
And and for others who came from the middle class or the striving to be to part of the upper middle class, doctor and lawyer. And that is what was put and instilled into them. And that generation is not gone, it's still here. The parents and grandparents are still are still alive. And that thinking is still in there. And what I'm saying to you, the vast majority of the persons to whom
yes.
you're speaking, I do not think they fall into the public service, nor do they fall into a
But,
dwindling middle class. What
but
they fall
Karen, I have
into,
been saying, let's change the narrative.
but
Just
how
as
are you going to do it? How are you going
parents
to do
have
it?
been changing the narrative in response to what is happening happening in the wider world, upon
Mm,
whom we are very dependent.
mm.
Even the narrative, because we are copycats, the narrative in this country
You sound
has.
like you sound like
Who's that?
because yes, I Paul, a
Oh
nation of
my
sheep,
goodness, the mimic man.
mimic land.
Listen to me. Listen, the narrative can be changed, but people have to be convinced that it needs to be changed, except they want to remain wedded to the lower stations of life, as I said earlier. But you
You know,
can.
you know
Hmm?
what's the hardest thing for someone to do?
What's that?
What's the hardest thing? I remembered actually way back, even before I got in the government, way back when I was teaching at the law school, and I got involved in invited to participate in programs. They
Right,
said the biggest issue for people is a lack of self-esteem
right.
and
And lack of self
and,
confidence.
and self-esteem, self-worth.
Right.
And you cannot blame a lot of people of color, especially Afro Trinidadians who have come out of slavery just not so long ago. Because I look at my own family. My grandfather was born in 1776. My grandfather was born in 1776.
Or you
And
go back that far,
yeah,
you'll be able to trace it, right?
because he died at 90 something, and everybody
Oh,
had long livers. But what I'm
but
trying to
still,
say is,
you're still talking about the 18th century.
yeah, but yeah, right. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there are the mindset that you're talking about. It is not in the interest now, I think, of those. Politics is about power. And if power becomes extremely important, or the loss of power is more devastating to you because people are essentially selfish. Ask Darwin, the theory of survival. I mean, human beings are essentially selfish. And if it is that your motivation is to stay in power, by all means necessary, and within a democracy and a democratic framework, if part of that is to keep persons thinking that they are worth nothing, that if they have a little stupid little job, say thank God for Jesus for that little job. If they have no self-value or self-worth, and you don't encourage them to see, listen, we will teach you to do this. I will give you an example I use on this show. Just as an example, I use as an example in like what we're talking about. I saw a man who was selling snow cone around on Monday, Carnival Monday, and I bought it. I bought this snow cone not for myself, for someone else. So I said to him, "You have any cards?" He said, "No." I said, "But why don't you have any cards?" I said, "You have to." I said, and nobody came and even the card wasn't very attractive. I know there are people in Trinidad who own first-class hotels and restaurants and businesses that know how to do things to the level at which we are now, the world that we are living in now. Someone needs, and the government, as part of the our tourism sector, that's only part of the tourism sector move. They need to take all of these vendors, show them how to dress, how to present their vending thing, how to print these cards, and also to offer their services. I told him, why don't you say to them, listen, I can do something. You have a Christmas birthday party, you have a children's party, and you have a doubles vendor. I can be the snow cone vendor. You're going to have an adult fete. I can come there and be your slogan. Here's my card. But nobody is there to give them that guidance. And what I am saying is,
Oh, you mean
people,
nobody there?
no one is willing to do it. You go to,
Because that speaks to the changing of the narrative.
right, and you know why? Because they don't want him to start having thoughts. Next thing
No,
he tells
they're
no,
going to provide some resistance, but they can be worked on.
no. You know what's going to happen?
Hmm.
Because when you go to the powers that be, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we're going to do that. Yeah. And then
Well,
they'll
I don't
come.
even want to go to the powers that be. I just want to go to people in this society
But
who
they,
understand that the old ways are unproductive. I
but
want
they
people to
need
see that
somebody to lead
there,
them.
there are
Don't you need a
horizons there, but
leader?
it doesn't have to be the politicians. The
I said
politicians, as you
leaders,
said,
I said
they're
leaders.
famous for wanting to hold on to. But you yourself said it. They are famous to want to keep people down to walk, and then once they
Yeah.
can get to move
Everybody
forward,
wants to have somebody that well, that's
right?
worse off than me.
But certainly, you can tell the snow cone man, and other than a politician, look, you can get some cards to advertise your work, right? And cards travel. They
It's not
travel. You can
only it's a
you can use
training, a
social
whole
media.
training. It's
Yes,
a
and
whole
that is why part
training.
of my proposal includes what? It includes sending those of professionals of various fields into those depressed societies, right? These oppressed,
Who's
down.
going to send them? Who's sending them?
Well, I was relying on government and
Oh, you
private
see, we come
sector.
and say, talk about the
No,
politicians then.
government and the private sector.
But don't you
In other
understand?
words, but they
Can
are
I just say
coming from.
something to you about that with the private sector? It's happened in this country. And it happened when I spoke to a young lady. She
Mm,
said to me, I said to her, she told me she was very unhappy with her job. But she said, I said, well, why don't you? It was more a rhetorical question. I mean, why you don't leave a job? You know why she can't leave a job?
right.
Because it's about a few, a minor group of people in this country that own everything, whether directly or indirectly. So
We can hardly use the term one percenters, right?
no, I'm not using it. I deliberately did not. I deliberately did not because it goes beyond that because you can have it it could have started however you want to say so. What has happened is we have monopolies in this country. We have
Right,
boards, interlocking boards. And what I
right.
can tell you is this: if she left that job and went to another job, which she thought had nothing to do with the job she's in now, suppose it's a job in selling food, and she went to get a job in a hardware in one thing, think it has nothing to do with the other. Do you know the person who owns that thing is the same person who owned the place that she just left? And before she could even get a chance. And do you know they understand that so that they have locked you down into a form of slavery because your option,
Are you saying the problem cannot be fixed?
you, well, okay, I'll tell you one way it could be fixed. One way it could be fixed. I'll give you one way. I'll give you one way I could tell you. One way that you could fix it, I'm talking about that particular problem,
Yes.
is that we stop having all of these coffee places in this. We cannot afford it in this country.
You
We
can, how
cannot
do you
afford.
how do you stop that?
Do not grant the license.
But if you have
Or
already
you
granted
limit
the
the
license,
license. Why they did? How come Rock Hard Cement Limited? How come Rock Hard, when the quartet had their meeting, they decided that Rock Hard could not sell their cement, or if they did, they had to sell it. They had to pay a CET of 20, 15 or 50%, and they had gave them a quota of only 15,000 tons, which made it impossible for them to compete. So how do you do it? You said, listen, we cannot. This is a small country of 1.4 people. Having so many franchises in a small country is using up the foreign exchange. We are not getting the return from that foreign exchange because we are not creating jobs of high quality that can justify the expenditure on so many. It's not that you won't have any, but you have
So why
some.
does the government do that? Use
Why
policy to
don't they?
restrict.
Well, your answer is as good as mine. I could give you the answer, but I ain't gonna give it, right? I'm telling you that if it is, then those same franchises that are all over this country are the same franchises that are responsible for the non-communicable diseases, that are responsible for a large extent our health sector bill in this country, and yet they are allowed. Why can't you put a quota? So, okay, this country can only, I think, 5 of them. We'll have allow you 1 year, 1
Yes,
year,
so,
1 year.
so I am asking you, why
So
is
I
the
gave you an answer. What I would do,
when you give the
I
answer,
would
but
not allow, I
you
would
haven't
not
actually
allow
answered.
so many
Question
franchises
is,
in this country.
are these politicians blind? These policymakers, are they blind, or are they in the pockets of people?
You go answer that yourself. I ain't answering that because everybody like wants to use the word sue, and I don't mean on a lady's name, right?
Yes.
You're not going to. I am not going to be sued. You put 1 and 1. You know what Mr. Pandey said? He said connect the dots. You connect the dots yourself, and you ask yourself in a tiny little country like this, where when I go to the bank, I have to struggle to get 100 US. And now 100 US, I struggle to get 100 US. And
Mm.
everywhere, all over the country, we have all kind of pizza chains. All kind. I like in America. I like I'm in America. So if
Mm.
you are telling me that my food bill is at $800 million per year, and you are telling me that inflation is eating away at my income so that the middle class is disappearing because 4% increase in salary can never counter the increase in the price of food. And so much of the food and so much of these franchises are being allowed to operate in this country, then you have to ask yourself whether that is in the interest of the country because you're using it up. There's no productive capacity coming from it. You're not producing. You're retailing. You are creating jobs that will keep me feeling at low self-esteem, have low self-worth because that's what I am. That's the thing I'm only good for because apparently I'm only good to do things like that.
Mm.
You keep me right there instead of taking, let us say like rock hard cement. Let us have a quota for how many pizza things we have, how many coffee, how many this. Do we need this? We can do this in this country. You're not saying you
So
can't have any.
are our leaders thoughtless then? Is it that? I mean, to be
You
mild
asking me to get
about
me
it,
in trouble? I am not answering that question.
but it's
I
got to
mean,
be.
you must have village idiot written on your forehead if you cannot figure out what's going on. So you just ask me to give you a solution. And
Yes.
by doing that, it will, then what you do now, because Trinidadians have shown themselves, COVID had a positive in a sense, because a
Yeah.
lot of people had to now become self-reliant and have their own catering businesses and started advertising on TikTok and on Facebook and so on. And you really got a very high quality. So what you now do now is you try to develop your brands. You start to develop your own brands, and you also export your brands.
I
Whether
know a lot of people. I know a lot of people who do that.
yeah, but
Or who are,
okay, but what I am saying is that from my perspective is always going to be a macro one. I
yeah.
always going to be a macro perspective. And because
Yes.
I'm going to have a macro perspective, I answered your question. If
Right.
I had any say, that would not happen. If I had any say, I would have training and make sure that the hotel school, I don't know if it reopened, the restaurant
I don't think
reopened,
so.
right? I make sure the hotel school reopened, I also make sure I train them to be able to be small businessmen in their own right. Let them do courses in marketing, show them how to presentation is everything, and that is how you will develop a micro and small entrepreneur in this country who can then contribute to his family in a real way, contribute to the revenue of this country, contribute to a sense of self-esteem and self-confidence, and finally break the chains of self-doubt which they want them to stay bounded, and then find out, hey, you know something? They always told me, like what they did with women back in the day. They used to tell women something about left brain, right brain. Women are emotional and they think things so they only for literature and arts and theater. But men are the active ones with the maths and the science. Well, we know now there are more women doctors than there are male doctors. So we know that all of that is a pack of crock. But you see that, but they sell it to you so much,
Yes.
they sell it to you so well that the women believe it themselves.
But the
So,
narrative can be changed. How did they change that narrative?
but I just told you if I was in government, that's what I would do.
Not you. I mean, you're saying
I'm saying when
that.
I say what should be done then? What could be
No,
done?
I'm saying you have spoken against the idea that women are only emotional beings and so on and so
Right.
on.
So God, I don't
And
really have
there are more female doctors than there
Yeah.
are male doctors,
Yes.
which means somebody intervene and change the narrative.
You know
Clearly,
what happened? You know what I think happened?
what?
The whole woman's you just said we are a nation of copycats. And
Right,
in today's world now with the internet, like when they had the Arab Spring, and when things happen now, and you've seen all what's happening even in America in terms of Black Lives Matter, and people understanding there's something called systemic racism, which people
right.
because all of a sudden now you're getting caught on a phone. That phone has become a weapon in itself, right? So the narrative started to change when they had the women's movement, but it was really led by people like Gloria Steinem, by the white middle class in America. And it took off. I mean, it was started earlier than that to get the women's suffragette movement and so on. But when it really took off was during that period. And
Yeah, you
then,
know, the philosophers say at a moment of salience, a salient moment with Gloria Steinem and these girls happened, and Lloyd Best would say accidents also happen. Things happen, and then you seize upon the accidental nature of things and get things going.
is it called serendipity?
Hmm.
Is that serendipity?
I don't know. That's a word I hardly use, Karen. I'm
Yeah,
not
but
so.
that's what it is, I mean, something unexpected that is positive. But anyway, the point about it is that didn't happen just like that. It was during the civil rights because I had done
Oh
a lot
no,
of
I'm
research on
talking.
it.
I'm not saying there is not causes. I'm not saying that. I'm
Mm,
not saying things, when you have effects, you have no cause. I'm not saying it at all. But I
mm.
am pointing out, though, that sometimes the moment is right
True,
and you
that's true.
the moment. I'm
The
talking
moment
about,
doesn't just happen though. It doesn't
well,
just that's another fallacy. People like to
difficult
think,
to
oh, this just
find.
happened. That didn't just happen. It was
It's
happening all the
difficult,
time.
but it's difficult to find the exact elements of cause.
Moment. Yes. That is
It's
true.
difficult. So you seize on the moment. There was a moment when Martin Luther King had to do what he did.
Yes.
The boy Floyd George had, he came along at a moment. Things happen
Yeah,
that
but at the
became
right time, because before that
right.
was Trayvon Martin. The country had started becoming more aware, even Obama, even Clinton, when they talked about, then they started questioning how many, all of a sudden, the prisons where the population in America is 30% black, but most of your prisoners are Afro Americans, and
Yeah,
most of the crimes are related to crack cocaine or drugs. Whereas all the Wall Street boys and all the movie stars and all of them doing the same thing, you're not touching them, right? And
right.
then they put probation conditions so high that they would spend more time in jail for breaking of probation than for the crime itself. And then they put the mandatory sentence, three strikes and you're out. So they set up a system to ensure what they call the new Jim Crow laws. The segregation came to end, so it is said that Nixon was so upset about that he
Yes.
said, "Well, those hippies will never vote for me, and definitely the blacks not going to vote for me. We have to find another way." According to the article, it was in the Vanity Fair, and his man of business gave the story. He said, "We have to find another way to deal with them." So suddenly they flooded so-called inner cities with not just cocaine but crack cocaine, which is highly addictive and very cheap. Made sure that they send the police and the media into those communities. And at 5 o'clock every afternoon, the 5 o'clock news, they paraded a black Afro.
So it's a kind of exploitation of their
Yeah, but it was
vulnerabilities.
deliberately planned. It did not just
Yes,
happen. That's
but
what I'm
I'm saying
trying to
the
say.
people themselves had to start off being vulnerable.
Of course, they're vulnerable.
That is the
All in the middle class in America, the ones that live in the so-called trailer park, who are on meth, they don't have they're not criminals, you know. They need to be rehabilitated.
yeah,
Their problem is rehabilitation. The
right.
ones in a city is they are
And
criminals.
we although our situation is not like that, where our young people, too many of them are, are slaves to the cocaine, the crack cocaine, and so on. But we do have people in the downtrodden communities who need to be rehabilitated. Would you agree?
Well, I don't know how my idea of rehabilitation, which may differ from yours. My
Mm.
idea of rehabilitation is that I think, this is just my opinion, that too many persons who fall into the micro entrepreneur um, classification have been taught by generations that they are worthless, that they're this, they're that, their negative messages have been given to them, and they have imbibed those
But I
negative
like your application of the term. That's
they
a
have
great
imbibed
application.
those negative messages.
So it's a kind of a
Therefore,
rehabilitation when you're fixing the problem,
they act out the self-fulfilling prophecy. They
right?
act out what is expected of them.
But
So the
because you
way,
don't believe the situation is hopeless, as I don't, that change can come if you
yeah,
have the right kind
yeah,
of policy, if you put the right measures in place, if you send my professionals to these areas, and so on and so on, if you get the community leaders and the potential leaders to move in different directions and multiply the gains that they can have from developing their own communities, I think we can go someplace.
but Dr. James, in everything you need leadership. Whether it is the
They
Martin
are
Luther King,
leaders, they are
whether
community
it is whether it
every
is Martin
community
Luther, whatever it
leaders.
is, you need a leadership. You need leadership.
Right, but you don't want imported leadership, do you?
No, 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 no. I'm not talking about poor leadership. You need leadership of, you know how they talk about the shepherd and the sheep? The
Yes.
shepherd leads from behind.
Well, you can have that if you can manage that. Fine.
But what I'm saying is, anytime you want to kill a movement or
Hmm.
bring a movement to end, you kill the leader.
That's correct.
You do. So what you need with all those ideas that you're talking about
Yes.
is you need someone who has the wherewithal, the capacity to do it, who has the coffers of the government and the access to providing it on a macro level to give that leadership and to allow people now, empower them to achieve their objectives. But you need that, because without that, you're like a nation, a lost nation. And they don't
That
want to
sounds,
do
you
that.
know, what that sounds like a
What?
statement policy.
God,
What I just heard from you there, a
but that
state.
is what I believe in, and that's what I would do.
Well, it's easier said than done, as we know.
But I know that, but I've been there, so I feel I feel that it's one thing I know now that I didn't know before.
Uh-huh.
One thing I'm more confident about that I would not have been before is
Yes.
having, and I don't mean it just come across in the wrong way at all, at all. I do know that if you are in the position of power and authority, and you have the vision and the mission, and you have the will of the people, in front of your vision, That
Yes.
if anything is possible, it can be done. Marshall Plan, when they had to rebuild Europe, they were very happy to bring in all those people from the former colonial things to come and rebuild Europe. As soon as it was rebuilt, the arrondissements, as they call them, when they serve their purpose, it created a lot of social and economic upheaval because
Yeah.
now they were creating employment problem. But when they needed them, Windrush, when they needed them, they brought them in,
Yeah. We
right?
were
So,
labor. We were labor.
right. So what I'm trying to say, but what I'm saying is, if they could rebuild Europe with the Marshall Plan, if FDR with the what you call it, the great something, I can't remember why it's escaping me, but with the highways and all of that, create employment using the Keynesian model, John Keynes model, and using that to teach people how to fish and not just to get a fish. Some people have to get them a fish, because they can't fish, they can't fish. But 95% you can teach them how to fish. They just need somebody to teach them. How many homes, for example, if you went to the hospital and you have two cars, one car went in a direction where they had a stable family home, parents who wanted their children to do well, created the correct kind of environment, and lived in the correct environment, not wealth, but the right environment, as opposed to someone who goes into a home where they're living in disharmony, chaos, parents not together, no direction, nothing. What do you think will be the outcome of those two when they become adults?
Right. Very good question. And that just tells you that that we are operating with a lot of deficits. People like me and you, deficits in this global context. But we are getting somewhere. We still don't have the military power to handle Europe and America. Clearly, no. We
Doesn't have.
don't have the economic power because America can do whatever it likes in its lawmaking chambers, and we suffer as a result. Look at what is happening with America imposing sanctions on countries in America and Latin in the Caribbean and Latin America. You know, we are weaklings where that is concerned, and they can continue to run the world um, on the basis of a great military base that they can invoke at any point in time. So yeah, but we in the meantime we can do things
Did we
by
do something with the Chagaramas when
yeah,
Eric Williams led that march down
right.
to base and took
So,
back
so that was
Chagarama?
one of the better things that Williams did, right?
But I didn't want to say William, just saying what we can do.
Yes.
We as a people were able to do that.
But you're going back into the past. Don't forget that you're arguing throughout some of your statements that the past can help guide the present and the future. I think
From this
you know,
point of view, human nature really does not change. A desire, envy, jealousy, greed, power, all those
but don't
sins you
forget
want to call them.
human nature has some good aspects as well.
Huh?
It's not only bad. It's
No, but
good.
what I'm saying is, whether you read the Quran, the Bible, Shakespeare, whatever, the reason why I could talk about what happened in the past, because human nature essentially does not change. What may change is
Yeah.
instead of a horse, you have a car.
But
But
I am asking you to consider that there are good parts to human nature which we can employ.
yes, but that's
And
what we hope. Yes.
that's what I'm saying to you. It's a
Mm,
mixture. But
yes.
we have focused on the bad elements of human nature. Right? And of course things have become fossilized over time. So fossilized that you don't even see the sweetness that is possible in human nature. People don't see that. And we develop terms like weakness, well, evil and wickedness, with the religions, of course, leading the way. But that's a big conversation we don't even want to start.
And I'm not being part of that at all.
Right. So, but going back, you had that statement of policies, which I thought was, I don't remember exactly what you said in ago. You said so many things, but I believe that you have to have change, change in the mindset of those who are settling for crumbs. You want change in a political system, in a political party that feels that in order for it to do well for the people, it has to keep suppressing and downpressing them. We got to change that narrative, but people in Trinidad are cowardly, Karen. Cowardly. Nobody wants to stand up against the leader because their bread and their bread has been buttered apparently by that leader and his party. You know of which I speak. You've been part of it, Karen.
I never got my bread buttered. Whatever I came in it, I came in with it was mine.
I was.
I got nothing buttered. I got nothing buttered. I got no jam, no cheese. I didn't even get a cricks. But I know what you're speaking about, though. But I
Yeah.
didn't. But I didn't. But I can genuinely say that I personally, no, I did not certainly did not see that in the prime minister. Whatever people could say, that's probably why I've stayed so loyal to him. I certainly did not see that in the prime minister. I can't say that I didn't suspect that of others, but didn't make them my business. I had a job to do, and I tried to do it the best I could
Excellent.
because I had a boss.
Well,
And I had
I
a boss.
believe that story needs to be told.
I
Yeah.
had a boss to please, and I wanted to make sure that I did my job. That he didn't make a bad decision,
Yeah.
making me Minister of Finance. So my full focus. I have my MBA, by the way, just in case people know. I didn't just a lawyer. I had an MBA too, and so
Right.
that helped me a lot. It helped me a lot. It helped me a lot. But what I do know is that my um, reason, and there was never any time any reason for me to doubt the commitment of the Prime Minister to Trinidad and Tobago, or me to my Prime Minister, to my cabinet, and to my country. There never was. What did I didn't, why was I doing that to myself? I mean, I had written 3 textbooks. I had done
These are
well.
law textbooks.
Yeah, legal tax, and I used all up 3 regions. They still use my
Right.
books. I understand.
Right.
So I have a sense of professional satisfaction.
Right.
Um, I whatever my reasons are, which I'm not going to go into. The point is that my motivation for going in was my love of my country and wanting to serve. And my experience, I can only speak of my experience. My experience did nothing to make me question that it could not be done. If the
Right.
will was not there, if you had the
Right.
will to do it, it could happen. And I was sure, from my experience of the Prime Minister, of his commitment to Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, I think there's a lot of evidence of the willpower of Mr. Manning. That is for sure. I believe he fell ill at the wrong time.
Yeah,
I think so. The
yeah.
innovations that he implemented were unprecedented at the time. He had some great, but people have to write the history has to be written.
People are
Um,
afraid to write it, you see.
huh?
I think they're afraid to write it because I don't think, anyway, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
And I want to just say something to the downtrodden, just my opinion as we spoke about the downtrodden, why the downtrodden continue, or I use the word downtrodden, but we talk about the persons who have not risen out of their circumstances and are still there, and you wonder why they have the lack of self worth and all of that. And one of the things that I believe very, very strongly, and it would be very difficult for me to be dissuaded otherwise, is that you have to have an army. You see those young men who have those guns? Those guns
Yes.
are $50,000, $10,000, $12,000. They don't own those guns. I read out all this already when Dana Sital was murdered. Mr. Brownfield, who was the U.S. Secretary of State, and he was assistant to dealing with drugs and so on. Can't remember the exact title, but he said, I do have a quotation here right now, but he said, and it's in 2014 she died. He said that the reason that Dana Sital was murdered was not they were trying to steal her bag. It was a well executed and well planned murder, and
Yes.
it was carried out by a transnational organization with its roots in Trinidad and Tobago.
Wow.
There's no question in my mind that the little young boys you see carrying around those guns which they own or can they own those 15,000 guns. That's what that are reporting in the Guardian about. So I'm not making that up. I got it from a newspaper report. If they are, and you have to have your little army to do your dirty work
Right.
because you're not going to go inside there and do the dirty work. And there is an informal economy in this country with billions of dollars that are involved in drugs and guns. When you speak to the police, they will tell you the explosion of gangs, and you ask them what is their business. This is in the papers I'm reading it from. They
Mm.
tell you their main business is drugs and guns. So who is behind that?
Right.
So you have to have your army. To have your army, you have to have vulnerable persons who are not self-sufficient financially, who cannot mind themselves, much less their children, or their old parents, whoever, who are surrounded by people who have extreme wealth, and therefore it is important to have them available. Because in those very same communities that we are condemning today, 20, 30 years ago, certainly when I was in school, those very same communities, yes, they were poor communities, a lot of them poor communities, but you heard about a foul thief. And it was every now and again you heard about a murder. These murders are execution style murders. 80%, that's what the police are saying, are carried out with unlicensed guns.
Okay.
So you understand the nature of the crime in this country is directly related to the transnational organized crime. And you have to have an army who they say, the police have said it, that they have guns and ammunition and equipment that is equal to the army or equal to the police. So let us, this is, you remind me that we are no longer in 19, whatever, 56 when Williams came around. We are in 2023. The
Right.
reality is that Colombia and Venezuela are transshipment points for guns and for drugs. And Trinidad and Tobago is the transshipment point. So those you need your army and they go and recruit. Where do you recruit? Do you go and recruit in a middle class home where the child going to school, doing well in school, mother and father at home, they have standing? Are you going to, you might try that because some children bad and they will just
Might
bad,
get
they
them
go
too.
bad. You might get one or two, but is you're more likely to get a child whose mother is working for one of those franchises from morning to night, even look after their child, put them, look over their homework, go to the PTA meeting or whatever it is, and come home whilst you are doing that, they are recruiting and they are recruiting. And when they come and recruit and they're telling you that they're going to pay you $5,000 to pull out a shot for them, who is going to say no to that? Because the person who's telling them to pull the shot is the person not living in their neighborhood, but living in big houses are the high society people in our country. So if you want to really know why, in my respectful opinion, and I am not saying in all cases, but I am my respectful opinion, the large majority of the reason why we have continued to have a group of people who are working with CPF and URP, which they don't get a full week's pay, a full pay, I mean, whole month's salary or whatever. The reason why you have them there is because they are vulnerable and easy to recruit and easy to, and you need them. Because from the time they start to smell themselves, as my father would say, and they start to figure they could be their own man and own their own little business, then you lose control. And it mightn't be as easy to do the recruiting. And I think that has a lot to do with the reason why these young people stay there at the bottom, and we do not have that kind of push that we should have to pull them out of where their circumstances.
We know crime and so on is multi-causal, right? We know that. But there are many young people who don't go that way, right? Who resist and who choose a different path. Sometimes at great suffering, but we do know that there are people who buck the tide. And I have to think like that because I have to believe in the future of this country. I think you too, Karen, have to believe that the narrative can change, and you too have to believe that we can improve the context, the socio-economic context in which our vulnerable youth live. And I want people to speak more to that issue in the conversations that flow from police, of course, finding a catch of guns, drug runners, you know, um, toxifying the young people with their dangling of cocaine and crack cocaine in front of their faces and so on. We've got to reclaim the country. Um, Apparently, from what you have just said, it's going to be extremely dangerous to do that because these guys who are part of the transnational arrangements, they have become embedded in our culture now. I don't know. I'm getting that sense. And if that is the case, our police and our navy, not navy, and coast guard, are they equal to the task? They are part of it too, I imagine, some of them, although you are not permitted to answer that question. But I believe that some of them are part and parcel of the transnational arrangements for gun and drug running in our country. So, Karen, we are coming towards the end of our little show. Let's say that we are in the show. Um, you have to have more people, more speakers going on the airwaves and talking sensibly about what is needed to change Trinidad and Tobago if we are to come out of the mire in which we are lodged. Do you see any new, although you probably can't call name, but do you see many young professionals showing up, talking about these issues, coming with recipes and recommendations? Do you see that?
I think um, I won't give a yes or no because I really don't, I can't say yes or no on that. But I do think that there are two things going on right now. There's either the carrot or the stick. On the carrot side, the economy is not in a good place. Actually wanted to talk about the fact that we just don't have the natural gas, and that's what we really rely on. And the price of natural gas is less than half of what we had budgeted for. So we are in trouble with that. But we didn't get to that. So I think for a lot of people, they believe that there are limited opportunities and they have children, they have families, they have themselves, and therefore they do want to buck the system. Because if they were to buck the system, they might find themselves out of a job. And when they try to get a job elsewhere, they won't get it because because they have created monopolies in this country
Right.
where it makes it impossible for you to be able to move around.
Yeah.
And so you have the carrot on one side, and some people love to be on boards. Some people love to be chairman of a board. Some people live for those things. They like the prestige. They like the recognition, and that's part of the human nature. So that's going to be the carrot. And for the stick, there are those who they will silence, whether by what, I don't mean silence, literally silence them. But in other words, they can be silenced by they can't get a job. Wherever they go, they can't get a job. Wherever, no matter how qualified they are, the message has already been sent. You see him? Mm-mm. You see her? Mm-mm. And you literally, and I know what I'm speaking about. I absolutely know what I'm speaking about. Um, and so that they silence you by, especially if you have children or you have a family to take care of, you have to say, well, I can't take the risk of going against the system as it is now and
Right.
then losing a job, and I have a mortgage to pay, I have my children to send to school. So I think right now we're seeing a lot of carrot and stick, and because of that, nobody, people are afraid to come forward, and for a leader to come forward to give people that courage to speak out. We haven't seen that happen.
Also, so they are frightening away people who probably have the
That's
ideas
my
as
theory. Yeah, I
well.
mean, I can't prove it. That's my theory.
Sorry?
I said that's just a theory of mine. A theory of
Well,
mine.
it's all theories we have, and we don't know what is absolutely right and absolutely wrong. There are all kinds of options, and there are options in our response as well. But then people, as you said, are human. We have human nature. We fear. We don't want harm to come to our loved ones. Um, we we bend to suit the fancies and so on of those who have the economic power and who have roped in the whole country in such a way. You know, Karen, sometimes I get the impression that people like me and you, that we live to promote the lifestyle and the wealth of the small percentage of people who command the ascending heights of our economy. You know, I get the impression that what I am doing really is to hold these people up, prop them up, and let them continue to live at my expense and your expense, right? And except I become a guerrilla, things will continue as they are. It will probably even get worse. Now that sounds hopeless in a way that I don't appreciate hearing myself say, but it does sound hopeless. Part of the reason why it sounds hopeless is the police don't seem to be gaining in the fight against those guys who have commandeered our economy. The police don't seem to be winning that fight. And there's so many desperate and vulnerable youth in the country. We don't seem to know how to reduce their numbers. One of my pet subjects is the falling into the cracks every year of people who graduate from the school system without any skills, any certified skills. I mean, very few people get the academic qualifications. We are not focused enough on the um, TVET and the TechVoc and the actual skill areas of economic life. We have not been able to change the focus on academics, right? Since we introduced secondary schooling into this country. So that bothers me. Um, and I would like that situation to be changed, but nobody is coming out. The Minister of Education has not come out and addressed this thing to the public, have a conversation. Maybe she doesn't trust herself, I don't know. But we do need somebody to be talking about these kinds of problems and relating them to the question of drug running and gun running and so on. We need people to come out. Um,
People are afraid to do that. That's what they are.
yeah, but how are you going to get change in the context
And
of
people
fear?
not, not everybody's a martyr, you know.
Ah,
Not everybody's a martyr, and you can't blame people, you know. I mean, people have their children, they have their spouses, they have their responsibilities. So even if they say, "Well, I don't care about me," you know, they care about their family, and it's not about anybody losing their life. It's about losing your job. When you lose your
yeah,
job, I mean, and you don't have a job, and the way there are monopolies in this country, or seem to be
yeah,
monopolies in this country, once you lose a job in one thing, you are blacklisted.
yeah.
And it's so, and they know that. So a lot of people, there's a lot of unhappiness and disenchantment. I know that from speaking to people, but Stay quiet because they're afraid to talk out. And they're afraid to talk, not because anybody going to hurt them particularly, but they figure maybe their family member,
Hmm.
or they just don't want to be. I guess things, when we see things happen, whether it's World War I or World War II or whatever war, and we all of a sudden we so shocked by it. It didn't happen overnight. It was happening all along. But what we did is we said we turned, because they're not affecting us directly, or they don't want it to affect us, and that's human nature. And so what is happening, I think, now is that, as I said, people, even though the unemployment rate is very low, it's very misleading because it doesn't talk about the underemployment that there is, and also what they call the labor force participation rate, which is what you really use to determine what the unemployment rate is, and it's very low. It's 55%, much lower than it was in years gone by. So it is a very misleading figure to tell me that there's 3 point something percent employment, and not tell me what do you mean by employment and what
Yeah.
is underemployment, and then how did you arrive at that figure? The
And
labor,
how
yeah,
you can use how you can use the 3%.
and if no, the labor force participation rate is where and what is happening is, if people are so, I think, cynical or so sense of hopelessness, and so they stop looking for jobs. And when you stop looking for jobs after a certain point, you are not part of the labor force, so you are not counted. And of course, some of them are in school, and some who would be part of the labor force are literally in high school, or they are retired. But there are a lot of them who are simply just give up trying to get a job.
Yeah.
And then those who have jobs, they're not telling you how many of them are CPEP and URP workers
No.
and what their take home salaries are. That's what we need to find out. You tell me 3.2% employment, but I want to know how many people are CPEP and URP, and what is the average monthly take home? How many thousands of that 3.2% you're talking about? And how
Right.
many of them are considered to be employed, even because the definition is you have to be stop looking actively for a certain length of time. If
Yeah.
you stop looking after 6 weeks, you are no longer counted. So it's
Yeah.
all very misleading, 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 misleading. But we've run out of time. It's 6 o'clock.
I have a meeting that started at 5.
Oh my God, I'm so honored.
Something
Yeah.
something I want to say before you guys disappear. Outside of those who are free to speak, there are those who speak, but nobody listens. They're probably listening, but they're not hearing. I think that is part of the problems to initiate some kind of change. Sometimes you talk to the people who are in authoritative positions, they listen, but in the end result, it seems like they didn't hear what you say.
Nothing happens. But we know that
Conversation,
is not the problem.
conversation needs to be repeated and repeated and repeated until the message gets home.
But okay, I'm glad that you are hopeful. I want to be hopeful too.
Yeah.
And one positive, hopeful sign is that I had Dr. Winford James come on the show
Yes,
and give up his time so willingly,
yes.
to us and to the country and to Trinidad and Tobago. And I thank you so much, as usual, for being my co-host, and your usual calm demeanor, and go and have your fight. Go down the road 5 minutes from now and go and have your sea bath.
No, that will have to wait until the other meeting ends.
All right, okay. But you have something to look forward to.
Yes.
Yes.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you so much, and a
Okay.
good evening to everyone. Good evening to you, David, Dr.
Yeah.
James. Good evening.
Yes.
Cheers.
Bye bye.